This news is funded by viewers like you. Please support our work at democracynow.org/give. Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. Talks are ongoing to further extend the truce in Gaza as the temporary ceasefire enters its final day. Secretary of State Antony Blinken spoke at a NATO news conference in Brussels earlier today as he prepares to head back to Israel and the West Bank.
We'll be focused on doing what we can to extend the pause so that we continue to get more hostages out and more humanitarian assistance in.
On Tuesday, 30 Palestinian women and children were freed from Israeli prisons after 10 Israelis and 2 foreign nationals were released from Gaza. This is Palestinian activist and student Ruba Assi, who was freed yesterday.
This joy is filled with pain and sacrifice, but also with a short victory. This feeling cannot be explained or put into words. We hope that all prisoners go through these moments, and our heroic people will greet them. We hope this truce will be extended to a permanent ceasefire, and we wish freedom to our heroic people.
Israeli media says renowned Palestinian activist Ahed Tamimi, who was arrested earlier this month, could be released in an upcoming captive swap. Meanwhile, Palestinian prisoner associations say over the first 4 days of prisoner exchanges, Israel arrested 133 Palestinians, nearly as many as the 150 they released. Among the remaining hostages in Gaza is a 10-month-old baby and 2 American women. Some Gazans have returned to their abandoned homes as they grapple with the utter destruction left by the Israeli assault. A Palestinian mother said she was using rubble from her leveled home to make fire to cook over. Aid groups, including the World Food Program, are warning Gaza remains at risk of an even worse humanitarian crisis and that more assistance is urgently needed.
Our team saw hunger, desperation, and destruction. People who have not received any relief in weeks. Hundreds of thousands that are facing an immediate risk of starvation. WFP hopes for the extension of this pause, which offered a window of relief that could pave the way for a longer-term calm. Safe and impeded humanitarian access cannot stop now.
An estimated 15,000 Palestinians have been killed in Israel's assault on the Gaza Strip. In the occupied West Bank, Israeli forces have surrounded 3 hospitals and are blocking medical teams as they conduct a major raid in the Jenin refugee camp. The head of Doctors Without Borders, Christos Christou, posted this video last night while trapped with staff at the Khalil Suleiman Hospital.
It's been already 2.5 hours that we are trapped in our hospital here in Jenin, while the Israeli forces are operating in another incursion in Jenin camp. There is no way for any of the injured patients to reach the hospital, and there's no way for us to reach these people.
Christos said at least 2 Palestinians died of their wounds while ambulances could not reach them during the siege. This comes amidst reports a 9-year-old Palestinian boy was shot by Israeli soldiers in Jenin this morning. The IDF has also destroyed at least 2 homes in Jenin, as well as roads and water mains, and rounded up at least 20 people. Rights groups say Israel's arrested 35 Palestinians throughout the occupied West Bank within the last 24 hours, including a 12-year-old child. Hisham Awartini, one of the 3 Palestinian college students shot in a likely hate crime in Burlington, Vermont, has released a statement from the hospital. Awartani, a Brown University student, said, quote, "It's important to realize that this is part of the larger story. I'm but one casualty in the much wider conflict. Had I been shot in the West Bank, where I grew up, the medical services that saved my life would likely have been withheld by the Israeli army," he said. On Monday evening, Brown students interrupted a talk by the university president, Christine Paxson, at a vigil for the shot students, calling for the school to divest from weapons manufacturers, including Northrop Grumman, Raytheon, and Textron. At the Ramallah Friends School in the occupied West Bank, which was attended by all 3 shooting victims, students and staff reflected on the tragic attack. This is Lean Al-Shahab, a senior at Friends.
As Ramallah Friends School students, we're horrified by the recent attack that targeted 3 of our beloved Ramallah Friends School alumni and friends. As Ramallah Friends School students, we call upon international communities to conduct a full and thorough investigation on this attack, and we call upon for this attack to not be dismissed or ignored by any means. Today, as students, we're wearing the hatta as a symbol of, or the kufiyya as a symbol of solidarity with our friends and for their families as well.
To see our interview with the head of the Ramallah Friends School, now General Secretary of the American Friends Service Committee here in the United States, Joyce Aljuni, go to democracynow.org. On Tuesday, Vermont Democratic Senator Peter Welch called for an indefinite extension to the ceasefire in Gaza. Welch's fellow senator from Vermont, Bernie Sanders, has yet to call for a permanent ceasefire. The Charles Koch Super PAC Americans for Prosperity Action has endorsed Nikki Haley for the 2024 Republican presidential nomination. Charles Koch and his network of right-wing billionaires is aiming to weaken frontrunner Donald Trump by throwing tens of millions of dollars and thousands of volunteers across the U.S. behind Haley's campaign. Among other things, the Super PAC is known for blocking efforts to fight the climate crisis. The Texas Supreme Court heard arguments yesterday in the lawsuit challenging the state's near-total abortion ban. Patients have been refused care despite serious complications and forced to carry non-viable pregnancies to term, often at great personal risk. This is Molly Duane, a senior attorney at the Center for Reproductive Rights, which brought the case on behalf of 22 patients and doctors.
The last 2 years are an aberration from a centuries-long practice in Texas that allowed physicians broad discretion to provide abortion when necessary to preserve their patients' lives. The abortion bans as they exist today subject physicians like my clients to the most extreme penalties imaginable: life in prison and loss of their medical license. And while there is technically a medical exception to the bans, no one knows what it means, and the state won't tell us.
Panama's president said Tuesday a contested foreign-owned open-pit copper mine that's been at the center of recent nationwide protests would be shut down. The announcement came just hours after the Panamanian Supreme Court ruled a 20-year contract approved by Panama's government with the mine earlier this year unconstitutional. Protesters had said the new contract for the Cobre Panama mine, which is owned by Canada's First Quantum Minerals, was fast-tracked with little public input or transparency.
Mining is another expression of the rising corruption in the country. I think this sentence is a hard blow to corruption and a clear message to future governors of the country that we will not allow more impositions and corruption that restrict the sovereignty of the Panamanian people.
The copper mine is the largest in Central America. In a major victory for Indigenous rights, an Ecuadorian appeals court has sided with the Sicopai Nation to regain ownership of their ancestral homeland in the Amazon rainforest. The Sicopai people were forced out of their territory, called Pequeya, over 80 years ago during the Peru-Ecuador War in the 1940s. This ruling will mark the first time the Ecuadorian government grants a land title to an indigenous community whose ancestral land is now a protected area. The Sicopai are on the brink of extinction with a population of only 800 in Ecuador and 1,200 in Peru. In a statement, Sicopai Nation President Elias Pioahe said, quote, "We are fighting for the preservation of our culture on this planet. Without this territory, we cannot exist as Sicopai people. Today is a great day for our nation. Until the end of time, this land will be ours," he said. In the Philippines, the government of President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. and the New People's Army, the military wing of the Communist Party of the Philippines, will revive peace talks for the first time in 6 years, facilitated by Norway. The negotiations were abruptly halted in 2017 by then-President Rodrigo Duterte. If successful, the NPA will end their half-century-long armed struggle and become a recognized political movement. This is Carlito Galvez, a former defense official, now presidential advisor.
Socioeconomic and environmental issues and the foreign security threats facing the country, the parties recognize the need to unite as a nation in order to urgently address these challenges and resolve the reasons of the armed conflict.
Last week, President Marcos Jr. issued an order granting amnesty to a number of rebel groups, including former members of the MPA and Communist Party. In Sierra Leone, 13 military officers and one civilian have been arrested after an alleged failed coup that left at least 20 people dead. Heavy gunfire broke out in the capital, Freetown, Sunday, as attackers targeted Sierra Leone's major military barracks near the presidential villa and two prisons where some 2,000 people were able to escape. Sierra Leone officials said the attacks were an attempt to overthrow the elected government. This is a resident of Freetown.
We are praying for this not to repeat, because this country belongs to all of us. If this continues, where are we supposed to go? Because we will not have this kind of peace in another man's country.
This comes just a few months after Sierra Leone's President Julius Maada Bio was re-elected for a second term in a disputed June election. At least 8 other military coups have taken place in West and Central Africa since 2020, including Gabon and Niger this year. And in Atlanta, Georgia, President Biden and Jill Biden, Bill Clinton and former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton joined other current and former leaders to pay tribute to Rosalynn Carter at her memorial service. All living First Ladies were there. 99-year-old Jimmy Carter, who is now in home hospice care since last February, was also in attendance. Rosalynn Carter was active throughout her husband's political career, acting as advisor and strategist. She's also remembered as an advocate for mental health care and unpaid home caregivers. This is her son, James Earl Chip Carter III.
Mom was always well informed on the issues of the day. In the White House, Mom asked Ed so many questions that he finally said that she should attend cabinet meetings. So she did, and caught a lot of flack for that.
We'll have more on Rosalynn Carter and her mental health advocacy, both as an advocate and an inpatient, later in the broadcast. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman in New York, joined by Democracy Now! Co-host Juan Gonzalez in Chicago. Hi, Juan.
Hi, Amy, and welcome to all of our listeners and viewers across the country and around the world.
Democracy Now! Is funded by viewers like you. Please give today at democracynow.org/give.